I never expected that taking my cat for a walk would lead to me being accused of animal abuse. It all started when I encountered Karen, a woman who seemed to relish in being entitled and high-handed. Little did I know, this encounter would lead to a run-in with the police. Here's how it all went down. I was taking a leisurely stroll with my feline companion in the park, which is a popular spot for pet owners to take their furry friends out for some fresh air and exercise. My cat is one of a kind, and has a unique personality that thrives on exploring the outdoors. As we made our way through the park, basking in the warm sun, I noticed Karen on the other side of the park with her dog. Karen seemed to be one of those individuals who act entitled and high-handed, always barking orders at her poor dog. I could hear her voice from afar, using a harsh and demanding tone to instruct her dog to sit, stay, come, and so forth. As I got closer to Karen, she glanced over and noticed my feline companion, and gave me an expression of disapproval. "Why are you taking your cat out for a walk on a leash?" she asked, as if she thought it was a ridiculous idea. I simply shrugged and replied, "He likes it, and it keeps him active." Karen rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath before taking her dog away. I couldn't help but feel irritated by her sense of entitlement. At the end of the day, both of us were just trying to give our pets some much-needed exercise and fresh air. I could sense that Karen was not going to let it go easily. She continued to trail me, keeping a close eye on my cat with a suspicious gaze. I tried to ignore her and kept walking, but she wasn't giving up. "Why do you even take your cat outside? Cats are meant to stay indoors," she said, still trying to find something to criticize. I stopped in my tracks and turned to face her. "That's not true. Cats can enjoy the outdoors just as much as dogs can. Plus, it's good exercise for him." Karen rolled her eyes and continued to walk alongside me. "I don't believe you. You're probably doing something illegal." I couldn't believe her attitude. "What could I possibly be doing that's illegal? I'm just taking my cat for a walk." Karen's tone grew more accusatory. "You're probably giving him drugs or something. That's why he's acting so weird." I was taken aback by her accusation. "What are you talking about? He's just relaxed because he's enjoying himself. And like I said, it's just catnip." Karen had noticed that my cat was very relaxed and seemed to be in a dreamy state. She thought his behavior was weird and unnatural. For those of you that don't know, catnip is a plant that is part of the mint family, and is known to cause a response in cats that includes relaxation and playfulness. It's often used as a treat for cats, and it's completely safe and legal. Karen didn't seem convinced. "I don't believe you. I'm going to call the cops and report you for animal abuse." I couldn't believe it. I was just trying to give my cat some fresh air and exercise, and now I was being accused of animal abuse. "Go ahead and call them. They'll see that I'm not doing anything wrong." Karen's accusations were completely unfounded, and I was starting to get really annoyed with her. I decided to just ignore her and enjoy the rest of my walk with my cat. As we continued on, I could feel Karen's eyes on us, and I could hear her muttering under her breath. Eventually, we reached the end of the park, and I turned around to head back. As we made our way back, I noticed that Karen was no longer trailing us. I breathed a sigh of relief and continued on my way. However, as we got closer to the entrance of the park, I noticed that there were 2 police officers waiting for us. My heart sank as I realized that Karen had actually gone through with her threat and called the police on me. As the police officers approached, Karen stepped forward to meet them. "Officers, this man here is giving his cat drugs," she exclaimed, pointing at me. I could feel my heart racing, and my palms were getting sweaty. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but the thought of having to explain myself to the police was nerve-wracking. The officers turned to me and asked, "Is this true, sir?" I pulled out the container of catnip from my pocket and held it up for them to see. "No, officers, it's not true. This is catnip, a completely safe and legal treat for cats. It's just a plant that makes cats feel relaxed and playful." The officers looked at the container and then back at Karen. "Ma'am, have you ever heard of catnip?" one of them asked. Karen looked embarrassed and flustered. No, I haven't," she muttered. The officers turned back to me. "Sir, we're sorry for the inconvenience. It seems like there's been a misunderstanding here. You're free to go." I breathed a sigh of relief as the officers left. Karen looked humiliated. At least I had shown her that I wasn't doing anything wrong. As I walked through the park, I made a mental note to be more patient and understanding with people like Karen. Perhaps if I took the time to explain things to her, she would be more willing to listen and learn. Maybe I was in the wrong. Karen left the park in a huff, clearly embarrassed by her mistake. I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. It was clear that she didn't understand the concept of catnip and how it was harmless to cats. I wondered if she was always this quick to judge and accuse people without knowing all the facts. The incident had shaken me up, and I couldn't wait to get back home. As my cat and I continued our walk, I couldn't help but think about how entitled and unreasonable some people could be. All I wanted was to give my cat some fresh air and exercise, and yet I had been accused of animal abuse. It was a reminder that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, there will always be people who will find fault with what you do. As we walked, I made a mental note to be more careful in the future and avoid confrontations with entitled people like Karen. While it was important to stand up for myself and my cat, it wasn't worth the stress and anxiety that came with it. From now on, I would try to be more patient and understanding with people who didn't understand catnip or other harmless treats for pets. It's amazing how some people can jump to conclusions without having all the facts. I'm glad everything turned out okay in the end and that the police officers were understanding. It's definitely a reminder to be patient and understanding with others, even when they don't understand something that seems obvious to us. What about you guys? Do you guys think this was truly a Karen, or was she just misinformed about catnip and overreacted? A Karen loses her mind at my truck stop restaurant, insisting her child can go wherever he wants, despite the dangerous areas. When I intervene, the situation explodes and leads to her punching a cop. Here's what happened. When I was 19, I worked overnight at a 24-hour truck stop restaurant attached to a motel in a small town. At the time, there was a massive, unrelenting heat wave, with temperatures reaching around 45 degrees C during the day and about 35 degrees C at night. One Wednesday around 3 a.m., the restaurant was full of people taking advantage of the air conditioning, which I didn't mind. The restaurant was falling apart and posed a considerable safety hazard. The serving line, with its equipment, knives, dirty dishes, sinks, and so on, was especially bad. Puddles of water, exposed wires, and a pack of razor blades for box cutters were all present. I'm honestly surprised more employees didn't get injured. An entitled mom walked in with her husband and 2 kids. I seated them at a table, brought them some menus, and took their drink order. After giving them their drinks, I went around to check on the other tables. Most people were asleep, including a lot of kids. I returned to my line to refill some drinks and found a random child, a little boy around 3 years old, running through the serving area. I picked him up, put him down outside the line, and told him he couldn't be back there. He seemed to understand and ran off. After dropping off a refill at another table, I noticed the same kid back in the serving line, this time with one of the knives in his hand. Although it was a dull knife, it was still dangerous. I grabbed the little kid, took the knife out of his hand, and told him he absolutely could not be back there, and that I didn't want him to get hurt. I began looking for his parent, but couldn't remember which table he was from. I put the child down and watched which table he went back to. It turned out to be the entitled mom's table. Not wanting to start any trouble, I decided to let it go, but moved the knives to a top shelf and relocated the box cutter. After dropping off some food at a table, I found the child back in the serving line again for the 3rd time in just a few minutes. I picked him up and headed over to the entitled mom's table. I placed the child in his seat and said, "Here you go, little buddy," as I put the kid down. "I'm sorry, but your son keeps wandering into the serving line. It's super dangerous back there. Please make sure he knows he can't do that. I don't want anyone to get hurt." The entitled mom replied, "What are you talking about? It's a restaurant. He can go wherever he wants." I said, "I'm okay with him running around, just not back there," pointing at the serving line. "There are dirty dishes, knives, and plenty of other dangerous things. Please keep him out of there." She snapped back, "How dare you tell me how to be a parent?" I tried to reason with her, saying, "I'm not doing that. He simply cannot go back there." She cut me off, demanding, "He can go wherever he wants. Where is your manager?" I explained, "My manager isn't here at the moment. Please feel free to call during the day and make a complaint," but she interrupted me again, screaming at the top of her lungs about how she was going to get me fired and how rude I was. At this point, the entire restaurant was awake and staring. In my scary, calm voice, honed over 3 years in customer service, I said, "Ma'am, you have until the count of 3 to stop yelling at me, or I'm going to have to ask you to leave." She continued to scream, so I started counting. 1! Her screaming persisted. 2! She screamed even more, her neck turning red and a pulsing vein appearing on her forehead. 3! "You may leave now," she protested. "You can't kick us out," I asserted. "Yes, I can. I've asked you to leave. If you don't, I will call the police." Defiantly, she shouted, "I am not leaving. Call them. Call the cops." I pulled out my phone and dialed the personal phone number of one of the officers on duty. I had to call the police multiple times a night, almost every night. Since there was no non-emergency line at 3 a.m. and the 911 operators were in a city 7 hours away, the officers had given me their numbers. As I spoke on the phone with the police, the entitled mom yelled at me, "You're not really calling the cops, you liar!" The police arrived in about a minute, as they must have been just down the street. One officer stepped between the entitled mom and me, while the other pulled me aside to ask what was going on. I explained everything to the second officer, who assured me he'd take care of it. The entitled mom started screaming at the police, claiming I was a terrible person and that I had assaulted her child. The officers tried to move her towards the exit while attempting to calm her down. She suddenly broke free, got right in my face, and yelled that I would regret my actions and go to jail for assaulting her child. I remained silent, having grown accustomed to being yelled at by far scarier people than this woman. The first officer stepped between us again and gently touched the entitled mom's forearm to move her acrylic gel nails away from my face. She backed up and then punched the officer right in the face. The second officer immediately tackled her to the ground, handcuffed her, and dragged her out of the restaurant as she screamed at the top of her lungs. She had actually punched a police officer. What could have been a simple talking to in the parking lot and an angry phone call to my manager the next morning escalated to her facing prison time. Unbelievable! Oh my gosh, OP, this Karen was on a whole other level of crazy. I mean, letting her kid roam around the dangerous serving area like it's a playground and then having the audacity to get mad at you for trying to keep him safe. And let's not even start on her punching a cop. I can't believe some people. Seriously, OP, you handled that so well. What do you guys think of this wild situation? Let me know in the comments. Am I the jerk for wanting to report my doctor, who is also my sister's lifelong best friend, for telling her that I'm on Vyvanse, a total HIPAA violation? My sister's lifelong best friend has been my doctor for a couple of years. Initially, my doctor, Dr. A, was a colleague of hers from the same clinic, but after Dr. A went on maternity leave, I temporarily switched to my sister's friend, Dr. B, as my primary physician, and it's been that way since the pandemic began, and I never switched back. I have ADHD and take prescription meds for it, which I have kept secret from my family members since I come from a long line of type A overachievers who don't believe in ADHD and write it off as laziness. A few days ago, my siblings and I were hanging out at my sister's house watching the Matthew Perry, Diane Sawyer episode where he shares his history with substance abuse, and I made a comment about how skinny he looked during one of the seasons of Friends. My sister then, out of nowhere, said to me, "Well, it started with prescription drugs, so I hope you don't get hooked." I was instantly gripped with a feeling of absolute horror. My other siblings were confused and looking at her for further clarification, but she didn't say anything more. I spent the whole night just frozen and with a deep pit in my stomach. Later, when I found some time alone with her, I had to pry the information out of her. She had just gotten back from a girls' ski trip, and when they were extremely drunk, Dr. B slipped up and mentioned that she saw me recently for an increase in my dosage and basically revealed to my sister that I've been taking prescription Vyvanse for a few years now. I'm so livid, feel utter betrayal, and have a strong urge to report her for breaking HIPAA regulations. My sister won't stop texting and calling me about it, literally all day long, begging me not to ruin her friend's life forever after years of hard work. She's obviously worried about losing her friend, but she couldn't care less about how disrespected I feel and how my privacy was violated. And more than anything, I worry that my sister will share it with my parents, and my family will never look at me or my achievements the same. By the way, I've known Dr. B my entire life, as long as my sister has. She was my sister's friend since they were in first grade, and they've remained close, and we've hung out with our families on multiple occasions over the years. We've even gone on trips together, including my sister's bachelorette. I always looked up to her and found her cool growing up. She and my sister both have kids around the same age, and they're close as well. Dr. B currently brings in the bigger chunk of the income in their family, and they rely on it. My sister keeps reminding me that I'm also ruining 2 innocent children's lives in the process, which is the only thing I feel guilt about. I adore those kids, and they don't deserve that. But I also cannot get over how betrayed I feel. I always keep a safe distance between personal and professional relationships and would have never picked her to be my doctor if the circumstances didn't unfold the way they did. She was the next best doctor and was the obvious choice because I wasn't really looking to switch to a new clinic during the pandemic. The OP left an update 3 months later. Thank you to everyone who offered their advice and support on my original post. I really appreciated it. After reading through the feedback, I decided to reach out to a close lawyer friend for advice as well. Much like the majority of the commenters, he agreed that I should report Dr. B for violating HIPAA regulations and breaching my fundamental right to health information privacy. He also suggested that I do it without informing anyone else and to do it sooner rather than later, so that the complaint can be filed within 180 days of when I knew that the act or omission complained of occurred. 2 days after speaking with my lawyer friend, I submitted a report to the OCR regarding Dr. B's actions. I did not inform my sister or anyone else about the report, and I wasn't sure whether Dr. B was even aware of the report yet. A few days later, I went back home for the holidays and saw my entire family. I hadn't heard back about the report yet, so I didn't say anything to anyone. However, that wasn't the biggest issue I had to deal with at that moment. My sister had already told my parents that I was on an extremely high dose of controlled substances. I knew my parents wouldn't take this news well, but I didn't expect them to react the way they did. My dad doesn't believe in ADHD and thinks it's just an excuse for people who allow themselves to get easily distracted, especially since the age of social media. He even commented that he noticed I was quite slow with my responses since dropping out of my chess club. These comments were not only absurd, but also extremely offensive. I was frozen and didn't know what to do or say. I just sat there, feeling nauseous and upset, while my parents and sister took turns criticizing me. My mom even demanded that I stop taking my medication immediately, saying that I'm better than this and smarter than this. She even went as far as threatening to tell your professors that you're on drugs if you leave us with no choice. However, that threat ultimately made me realize that I did have a choice. I could choose to never have to deal with this kind of treatment again and to not let my family make decisions for me anymore. So I chose to say nothing and allowed them to interpret my silence as agreeing and submitting to their ways, as I had done so many times before. After that, I went to my room and booked a flight back to my university. I packed most of my belongings, my books would need buses of their own to be transported anywhere, and called an Uber a few hours before my flight while my family was still asleep. The next morning I flew back to my university, feeling relieved that I had finally made a choice for myself. In January, I found out that Dr. B had prior complaints from patients against her, and my report had opened an investigation, which is currently ongoing. She's been placed on temporary leave until the case is resolved. I can't share any more details at this time, but I will come back and update once the investigation is over. The OP left an update after the investigation finished. After many months of waiting, I finally received a call from the OCR regarding Dr. B's case. They informed me that she had been found guilty of violating HIPAA regulations and had been fined, although they couldn't disclose the exact amount of the fine. They also informed me that she had been fired from the clinic where she worked due to her actions. I was relieved to hear that justice had been served and that Dr. B had faced consequences for her actions. However, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness and disappointment that it had come to this. Dr. B had been my sister's best friend since childhood, and I had known her for almost as long. I had looked up to her and respected her as a person and as a doctor. It was difficult to reconcile that image with the reality of what she had done. My relationship with my family had also been strained since the incident. While my siblings had been supportive of me throughout the process, my parents had continued to be dismissive of my ADHD and my need for medication. However, I had also come to realize that I didn't need their approval or validation to live my life. I had made the decision to continue taking my medication and pursuing my academic and personal goals, regardless of what they thought. I think it was the right decision to report the doctor for violating HIPAA regulations. It's important to protect your privacy and hold people accountable for breaking the law. It's unfortunate that it caused strain in your family relationships, but ultimately, you have to prioritize your own well-being and do what's best for you. Anyways, you should check out the video on screen, where a Karen mistakes OP's winter vest for a bomb and calls the police. Yeah, this is just off the hook.